悪霊退散。
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we have, in my opinion, more evidence that Julia will be a part of season 3. You guys already know my prediction, which very well could be wrong, but it's still my prediction. I think that it's going to be Marduk, I think that it's going to be Julia, and then I think it's going to be Miguel, followed by a guest character. Now I'll talk about, because we have more evidence for Marduk, I'll talk about that in a future video. Stay tuned, subscribe, there's a lot of things I'm working on. But as it pertains to Julia, and also in this video we're going to be talking about Eliza, because I know a lot of people like her, and Harada has some tweets about her. So we're just going to dive into everything and talk about what's coming next for Tekken. For those of you who don't know, Harada has been tweeting a lot. He's been battling with players on Twitter. I made videos covering that whole situation with Christy. Responding to that whole situation, this person says, every other day, y'all are getting grievances. If you were to stop engaging, guess what? People would complain that you weren't there to complain at. I truly understand why you say don't ask me for anything. Now, even though Harada and Michael Murray and the Tekken developers can be very aggressive online, I still try to appreciate the few words that they do give us, because it's a lot of, one, hints, it's a lot of, two, and also it's a lot of extra lore. And some of this stuff, like if you go to the Street Fighter camp, the Mortal Kombat camp, they don't really get this type of interaction with Harada. So when I see him say on Twitter, I'll stop engaging, in my opinion, when I read messages like these, my heart breaks a little bit, because the relationship between player and developer are oh so important. And on Twitter, Harada gives us a lot of good information and a lot of hints and a lot of updates and just a lot of stuff. And I don't think the players should focus on all the negativity a lot of times. We got to look at the positivity. And on the topic of the positivity, someone tags Harada and says, "What's up with Julia these days?" This reminds me back when someone asked him, what's up with Christy in the Tekken 7 days? And Harada responded with, Christy is just out there in the world drinking coffee. She's alive and well, is basically what he said. And that had a lot of people feel very hopeful for the character that she could one day return. And now with Julia being so important to a lot of players, people want to know this answer as well. Also taking into consideration that Julia is one of the oldest female characters like throughout the series, like she's been in pretty much all the game, her and her mother. But then also keep in mind that she's the only American female character that Tekken currently has. That's crazy. Harada responds to this and says she is sleeping in the company's nap room. Very, very subtle this tweet is, but this tweet sent the community roaring. And I personally believe that this is like just another sign that the character is on her way. A while ago, I made a video about this super long tweet that Harada made, basically where he asked the players, well, really not the players, but the Native American Tekken players, a serious question. And this was at the start of Tekken 8, so this was probably like a year and a half ago, right? So we know that their DLC characters like have like 2 to 3 years in development, and considering that he was asking this question about Julia like almost 2 years ago now, you know, if he is working on Julia, he would have taken all that feedback into consideration, and now her reveal will be coming up, which is why I say she's super likely to be here in season 3. But basically this question that he was asking, I'll just make it short because I made a video about this like super detailed in the past. You could go back and watch that. But basically what he is saying here is how in the past he got some pushback by some people for making Julia a stereotype. You know, you just put a feather in her hair, you give her some Native American clothes, and then boom, Native American. And he was saying, like, how do I represent the culture, the region, the place without it being called a stereotype? And there was a really good response, because you guys can pause and read all of this or go back and check the other videos that I made. But this response right here was really good. And it was basically talking about how instead of just trying to do Native American, focus on a specific culture in Native America, because there's so many different parts. If you go to the east, to the west, to the south, considering that Julia is from, I believe, Phoenix or Nevada, something like that. They may be the same place. But considering that she's from that region of America, maybe Harada can focus in on a tribe there and really bring their culture to life. And not only would that give Julia more personality, but it would just dig more into to the character, because I think we all would agree she is kind of a surface level Native American. And if they were to dig deeper and pull a lot of meaning out of there, we can have not only a better story, not only a better design, not only a better character, but everything would be so cool. So hopefully this is what Harada is doing. And with this tweet here where he says that she is sleeping at Bandai Namco, hopefully this is like a pun to where he is saying that like she is just waiting, right? Because what do you do when you wait? You fall asleep, you take a nap, all of a sudden your name is called, and then you're like, oh, yeah, I'm here, you know? So we can hope that that's what's happening with the character Julia, and she will show up in season 3. Now, as for another character who I don't think will be in Tekken 8 is Eliza. You guys got to keep in mind, when you talk about the usage data, Eliza is at the very, very bottom. Now, usage isn't the only thing that's important. Harada said when he's deciding characters, he takes many things into consideration, like story, like popularity, usage data, a lot of things. And when you talk about the popularity of Eliza, you got to keep in mind that Harada once said that this character is the most cosplayed character in all of Tekken. Now, obviously, Reina stole that thunder, and a lot of other characters have became really popular then. But if they were to bring her back, you would have to imagine that that trend would continue. So she's popular in one instant. So that's something that's going for the character, right? A lot of characters, they have no cosplay, they have no data, they have no fan base. They just have like 3 people who's like, hey, my childhood, you know? So Eliza has a lot of story and stuff to her, right? But this person here asks Harada, is there any chance that we'll see Eliza in Tekken 8? I love her design and enjoyed her a lot in Tekken 7. It would be a pleasure if she returned. Now, Harada responds to this and he says, I've actually answered this question about her in the past as well. Her design is definitely popular. There, he's talking about the cosplays, right? She is definitely one of my favorites too. We know when Harada does this Harada bars, he always has like a Lily and Eliza cosplayer behind him. This speaks to that. So honestly, I still like to tweak the design a bit more. Now, when he says this, it makes me think back to another tweet he made. This one is not only important for the character Eliza, but 2D characters in general for Tekken. In Tekken 7, we had 3 2D characters, Akuma, Geese, and Eliza, and all of those characters were busted. Yes, Eliza was the most balanced out of them, but you know, Arslan proved, the Pakistanis proved that Eliza can be a monster if you really wanted to. But it was just like, why would you play Eliza when you could play Geese or Akuma, right? So she was strong, but she wasn't them. But considering that all 3 of those 2D characters were monsters, it just makes sense as to why Harada would struggle to think about how incorporating them. You know, the 2D characters have 2D mechanics, EX, high jumps, but then also 3D mechanics. And that combination is overwhelming. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with that in Tekken, right? A lot of characters also can't deal with it, projectile spam and whatnot. But what Harada says, this is responded to someone who asked the question, Harada, please bring Eliza back. Don't let that cool of a design go to waste. She was incredibly cool. Harada says, if Eliza's animation and fighting style can be adjusted a bit more to suit a 3D game, I think a comeback could be good. The fact that he specifies 3D game means that he is specifically talking about the 2D natures of the character. And the fact that he is talking about the 2D nature of the character means that he probably feels this way about a lot of 2D characters. And this is kind of worrying for me because a lot of people would like to see 2D characters from like Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Mortal Kombat, whatever other fighting game, KOF, Fatal Fury. We want to see guest characters from other fighting games, but a lot of those other fighting games are 2D. Of course, you have the virtual fighters and the DOAs that aren't, and you know, fair enough, you know, those are good. They don't need the overhaul. But when you talk about the 2D characters being so problematic, Harada is struggling to figure out how to work on Eliza. It just means that maybe they're struggling to bring 2D characters in as a whole. We know the 2D characters was really problematic, but were they this problematic? And also, when you talk about the game that they were supposed to make, Tekken Cross Street Fighter, I often talk about how busted that game would be because the 2D characters have such an advantage. So Harada's probably trying to figure out a way to decrease that advantage, but also keep the gameplay intact because the 2D character is supposed to be a 2D character. But how do you give the other characters a fair advantage, right? So it's an interesting conversation here that Harada is having with talking about all of these different characters.